What's going on, guys? Welcome back to review and discussion for UnOrdinary episode 279. Honestly, this episode was really short. It was really short. Well, at least compared to recent episodes. Now, this episode was still a really good episode. Just more talking, more setup for what's to come. Honestly, like I've been saying, it's to be expected at this point. Not a lot's going to be happening right off the bat, but Uru is really setting up everything that was promised in the second half of season 2, with the art that we received. So let's just go ahead and jump right into discussing all this. So first things first. Once again, I called it episode 279. My bad. I said 278, didn't I? Episode 279, God, starts off immediately where it ended, where Kuyo kind of introduces himself, or presents himself to the trio, Remy, Black, and Ison, and Remy immediately just runs up to Kuyo and is like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in, so long, how are you? So yeah, Kuyo and Remy know each other because of Ray. And also just a little bit later in the episode, Remy also mentions that she hasn't seen Kuyo in months. So I do believe it's very likely that he did end up attending Ray's funeral. It makes sense. And like I also said in my reaction, I think this does just kind of lead more credence to the fact that Kuyo can be trusted. Kuyo's not a bad guy. Hopefully Uru's not setting us up for disappointment. But yeah, I think this does lead truth to, what Kuyo said being truthful. Ray and him were friends, and he really was changed by the book UnOrdinary. I mean, he is still risking his life doing vigilante work. So yeah. So Kuyo then greets Blake by name, saying, Blake, it's good to see you again. And Blake's kind of like, how the fuck do you know my name? Remy then gets curious as to how they met each other, and Blake says that they had just met, and Kuyo says that they just met by chance, which is true, again. And then he asks to talk privately with Blake for a bit, and then Remy and Ison decide to follow them. So once the two of them are alone, Kuyo asks Blake if he knows John and Serafina. Now, this was a nice little tidbit that Uru included. He calls Sarah a friend, and he calls John his roommate. And, that makes sense. They're not exactly friends yet, but they are getting on friendlier terms. So Blake, it seems to me that Blake kind of shares the same sentiment as John when it comes to their situation. They're not enemies anymore by any chance, but John did mention, I don't know if friends is the right word you can call us. But yeah, I think it is very clear that at this point Blake isn't holding anything against John, but he's not really sure that they're friends yet either. Anyway, so Kuyo informs Blake of their current situation, almost being murdered, their weakened status, and that he was the one who saved them. He even mentions his speculation that it's connected to the missing persons reports, which it is. It's not necessarily that they're entirely connected as they were targets, so to speak. It's that the people who were kidnapped and the person who went missing was also just kidnapped by the person who tried to murder John and Sarah, most likely, since Agent 23, is that who it was that what Oren called him, was there when Oren unbagged them and had Rain and the other guy kill him. Anyway, so Blake then begins piecing together how it's likely that Spectre would target them in their compromised status. Kuyo then asks Blake if he knows something because he wants to get to the bottom of it. He wants to take action. And once again, I called it. He wants Blake to join him. Now, Blake, of course, obviously objects. He told Kuyo way back, I'm just a student. I shouldn't be getting involved with vigilante stuff. This is way above me. I'm not doing this anymore. But Kuyo retorts that it's getting dangerous for him to act alone. So I want to talk about this real quick. This kind of leads me to believe that up until this point, Kuyo has been working entirely alone. So I am wondering if him and Ray were working together ever, or if they were working completely separate as vigilantes. And Kuyo did mention that Ray mentioned him that he should read UnOrdinary. He recommended it to him. So did he do that before or after Ray's death? I'm not too sure. I think it is very likely I think it's very likely that he read it before Ray's death, just based on some information that we get, again, later in this episode. I'll touch on that a little bit. But right now, I'm honestly not too sure whether or not Kuyo and Ray were fighting Ray's last battle together or not. So, more on that in a bit. So, he then offers to be the frontman for Blyke, and Blyke can just support him behind the scenes. More on that in also a second. But it also makes sense. Kind of like it could possibly be like their last mission where Kuyo took care of Lennon, then he just had Blyke take care of the other guy, of the Radix, I think his name was. Anyway, so Blyke and Remy Ison and Remy are clearly hearing all of this, and Ison speculates if Kuyo and Ray did team up, and then Remy is reminded of her encounter with Vulcan. She then reveals herself and asks Kuyo if he was there when Ray died. She even mentions Vulcan by name and also mentions her ability with the fiery claws. And Kuyo asks how she knows about this. Now, back in episode 199, Kuyo does mention he was able... This is what I wanted to talk about. Kuyo mentions he was able to trace the amplifiers back to their origin. Was this something that he figured out with Ray or after Ray's death? And honestly, I feel like just based on this information, Kuyo might have started becoming a vigilante after Ray's death. Just because he mentions that he was able to trace it back to their origin, that he was able to trace it back to the lab's or to Ember's origin. And again, it feels like he kind of took action after Ray's death. Now, something I had been speculating about for a long time was whether or not the dampener was used on these heroes to get them weakened so that they wouldn't have a chance against someone like Vulcan. So I did a little more digging myself. Now, Ray's death was announced in episode 6 of the series. It was announced the death of the hero Ecstatic was broadcast on TV. Not the death, but the announcement of his death was. In episode 47, however, it was announced that 2 months prior, as of episode 47, when John and Arlo were at Woboboba, that Next Gen had some of its research data and equipment been stolen to one of their projects that they had been working on for the authorities. So, in that case, I don't think it's possible that Ray nor Kuyo were dampened by Ember at any point just based on the timing alone. They probably would have been dampened and, stuff like that probably before Spectre had gotten their hands on that, which we're still speculating that Spectre is indeed the ones who did steal that stuff from the authorities for the dampener. So, yeah, as loose as the timeline we have right now of early UnOrdinary, I don't think that 2 months had passed from episode 6 to episode 47, mainly because Seraphina's suspension had only been for a month, and it hadn't been a month at that point when Arlo had met up with John. At most, I think it was probably 2 weeks. So there's that. I don't think that Kuyo nor Ray were dampened at any point during their fight with Ember. What I think possibly happened is that Ray had his encounter with Vulcan, most likely, just because she kind of said that same stuff about Ray and everything. I think that Ray had his encounter with Vulcan. He was a 5.8. She's clearly got to be a god tier or something if she's Arlo's aunt, since she's Arlo's aunt. Now, I do think that Rei was defeated by Vulcan, and Kuyo possibly could have been Rei's guy in the chair. Rei's support behind the scenes, similar to what Aizen and Blake did for Remy at first. Now, Kuyo mentioned, like I said, in episode 199, Kuyo mentions that he was able to trace the amplifiers to the source at Ember. I think it's possible that Kuyo possibly hasn't confronted or encountered Vulcan at this point. I think he may have found her, however. He may have seen what she's capable of. He may have seen her kill some people too. So I think that's how Kuyo knows about Vulcan. Now, I could be wrong. Episode 280 is about to come out. So for all I know, Uru could just drop that Kuyo was there. And honestly, if he was there and they were just that outmatched, that's totally fine by me. Honestly, that's perfectly fine. But that's what I'm speculating right now based on what we've seen in the story and the information we've gotten in the past. So there's that. Now, in reference, I think it's really clear that this is how Blake and Remy get back in the Vigilante game. They're going to be Kuyo's backup, essentially. And Aizen is going to be the guy in the chair, the guy behind the scenes with the support, because that's kind of what his best bet is. Maybe Aizen will also get some training of his own with Kuyo as well. That way, if shit goes south and Aizen has to protect himself, Aizen's measly, 4.4? His measly level, that way he doesn't get too fucked up. Yeah. But that's what I think now. And also just something from my research that I was able to look into. Also mentioned in episode 6, Loven is the closest town to Wellston. So it's not as far away as I thought it was. But whatever. That's cool. So overall, what do I give this episode? I would honestly give this episode a 7.5. It's really short, but it's also still really good. There's a lot of good information and pretty good reveals too here that I was pretty content with. So yeah, it's a level 7.5. Definitely not the best of episodes that we've seen, as of late. But it's still a really good episode, and I'm still really excited to see what Uru has in store for episode 280. So with that being said, guys, let me know what you guys thought down below in the comments, and I will be sure to check those out. And yeah, I can't wait to see you guys back here for episode 280, the live reaction live stream tonight. So, as always, everyone, see you, Space Cowboy.